Have you ever felt called in the depths of your being to share something deeply meaningful to you? Maybe a song, a story, or simply your true self. But a nagging doubt pulled you back and convinced you not to do it. If you've heard a voice inside telling you, you're not good enough, no one cares, you're not worthy, well, you're not alone, and you're in exactly the right place. We all have unique gifts inside of us, and yet too often they remain hidden, silenced by our inner critics. Today we dive into how we can overcome those doubts to embrace and share our inner voices with the world. Welcome back to the We Are Already Free podcast with your host, Nathan Maingard, where we remember together that simply we are already free. When you hear the words, we are already free, what comes up for you?
Acceptance.
Change.
The shift in awareness.
Human beings are so powerful.
There's so much more.
Everything is love behind it.
Breaking the chains of your own mind.
That which remains.
Nature.
Getting out of the matrix.
We're sitting on the treasure and it's already unlocked.
We are already free.
You're free.
You are a walking map.
Have always been free.
You are always free, already free.
We are already free.
Joining us today is Nessie Gomes, whose journey through music and self-discovery has transformed her fear and insecurity into powerful sources of strength and inspiration. Born on the island of Guernsey and enriched by her Portuguese heritage, Nessie's music and story are testaments to the beauty and challenge of personal transformation. If you're ready to reclaim your beautiful voice and overcome those paralyzing inner narratives, this episode is for you. Nessie will share her own experience of using your voice to heal and connect, truly a journey not to be missed. In this episode, Nessie shares the healing power of singing, how her voice helped overcome childhood insecurities, from Guernsey to the heart of the Amazon, her transformative experiences with sacred medicines, the neurological insights into what happens when you sing. It's pretty awesome. As well as her workshop, the Vocal Odyssey, which is a workshop that transforms voices and lives. As we prepare to overcome self-doubt with Nessie Gomes, think about how you start your day. Do you struggle with the snooze button and finding your groove of authentic expression? Join me for the free 5-day morning practice challenge. It's crafted to jumpstart your morning with purpose and positivity, transforming those first crucial minutes into a powerful launch pad for inner peace and creativity. Are you ready to reshape your mornings? Sign up via the link in the show notes to begin your day empowered and aligned. And now, please enjoy this mystical, musical, magical episode with the delightful Nessie Gomes. I don't always hear stuff that strikes the chords of my heart with a powerful resonance, and your music really does that. So as we begin, just an honoring and a gratitude for what it is you're bringing into the world. The question that's coming up for me now is around creativity, and like I expressed, this clarity that you bring through. And it's something I for sure continue to wrestle with. I was playing music professionally for 10 years and I kind of burnt out, and I support people through coaching and breathwork and other things, and the music's still a part of it. But I can feel there's a kind of a block there somewhere around this fear of being heard, or fear of not being enough, really, I guess, is a deep part of it. And I wonder, did you ever go through something like that? Or what are your experiences around this idea of having a voice and being willing to give everything to expressing in that way?
I think I'm still navigating those waters in a way, like where I'm kind of faced with my own creative challenges and blocks. And I think for me, at least when I started getting into music and singing primarily, because that was my entry, was through singing, it was always for me a healing process rather than I'm going to kind of write a song for an audience. Or the starting point was the journey with myself and kind of finding music as a refuge and as a place for kind of my own self-healing. And so there wasn't, I don't know, like, of course there are many moments where I struggle with my creative expression or I feel those blocks. But yeah, I think for me it was very much, for many years, it was just the journey with myself and using music as a medium for healing my own heart and spirit. And the fact that it went out there, like this body of work, these songs, for me, I just wanted to make an album. And because I had collected all these songs and I was like, I need to make space for the new. And that's not going to happen unless I kind of put them down and put them out. And yeah, I never imagined, I guess, that it would be received so warmly from such a beautiful group of people. I don't know if that really answers, but it's kind of an ongoing journey. But I guess,
hear that.
yeah, it's, I don't know, my voice, I consider myself to be more of a singer than a guitarist. I learned the guitar as a way to accompany my singing. And I didn't want to be dependent on anybody. In the beginning, when I kind of started exploring singing, I was playing in bands, and back in the day when we didn't have social media, it was kind of a thing. At least that's what I was aware of, is like during those kind of the 90s, like everybody was in a band, especially where I lived. I don't know what it was like in the UK, but in Guernsey, it was a thing. Like everyone was in a band or kind of exploring with music somehow. But then at one point I was like, oh, I just want to be able to do it myself. So I learned the guitar. And I'm not like, I don't consider myself to be like a very articulate guitarist, but what I play solidly. And yeah, it was like the kind of, how do you say, it kind of just supported me in my expression for singing and writing.
Yeah, I hear you. It's nice in a way. It's like reassuring to hear, because your voice is so clear and it comes through so clearly. And then to hear you say, yes, I'm also have my wrestles with my creativity. Is, oh yeah, that's that human experience. Actually hearing Rick Rubin, I'm not sure if you know of him.
He's like, he's become my guru in the last couple of years.
I mean, what a
every
dude.
word he speaks, I'm like, oh my God, you're speaking to me. And I'm sure he's speaking to everybody. But it was really, I was listening to a podcast with him and Huberman. Who was this guy?
I've been listening to that episode.
I think it was like the protocols of creativity. And he kind of described how to treat the creative process like a diary entries. And I loved that. I don't think I ever kind of thought about it like that, which sounds silly in a way. But I was like, because sometimes my blocks are like, what am I feeling? What do I want to express? And I feel like I shared so much in Diamonds and Demons in terms of the human experience. And I don't know, I didn't want to repeat that necessarily. I feel like I've done that, and maybe not, because I mean, you look at love songs, people write a million squillion love songs. You can never get tired of it. I'm sure you can never get tired of the human experience, and there's so many angles to it. But I didn't want to, I guess where I am right now is I don't want to feel stuck in that place that I have to just talk about my own personal journey. It's like I'm kind of searching for new avenues and a new way of expressing and looking for things that inspire me topic-wise and content-wise. And so I don't feel, and this is for myself really, it's not for anyone else. It's just like this sense of feeling like I've done that and I've been there, and I'm like, okay, what do I want to call in? And I feel like I have so much to share, and I don't know, it's finding my way with that. Sometimes that channel is open, and for me, I find it, I need a certain kind of cultivation for that to be open. And I'm sure maybe there's some blocks there or some kind of limiting beliefs or thoughts that are giving me excuses of why I can't. So I'm kind of wrestling with that. And there's this amazing book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. And this is another epic book. I don't know if you've read it, but it's really...
No, you're like the sixth person to recommend it to me. I really need to read that book.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's really digestible. Like, I'm not a massive reader. I struggle with reading. And so it's very digestible, and it talks about resistance in a really beautiful way. And yeah, I found that very inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. It's, yeah, what I love about Rick Rubin, he's actually just he helped me to unblock a little something just listening. I haven't finished that episode yet, but basically it was that kind of part you're talking about where he was saying around, it doesn't matter how it turns out. Like, just stop worrying about where it goes. Just do the thing. And actually, an old song came back to me from years ago that I played, and I loved it. I loved it so much, but I never played it to anyone else because I just thought it's very repetitive. It's basically the same chords and the same melody over and over again. And who's going to want to listen to that? And it just came back to me, I think, after listening to that episode. And I actually recorded a little snippet of it, just a one take little thing that I'm going to put out on Instagram, because I'm like, this song to me is beautiful. Like, when I play this song and I sing these words, I just feel so at peace, and it feels so true and exactly how I like to sing, and lyrics and melody. So I'm just fucking putting it out there. And that feels like a liberation. And it's because of listening to Rick Rubin. So it's so interesting you having that similar kind of invitation there.
Yeah, and I think also when he talks about the audience being like the last piece, you need to, I feel like I've never done that anyway. I've never written for an audience. I've never written within my mind, okay, what are people going to, I never go by that. I've never been like that in my life, whether it's regarding creative writing or just living my life in a different, whatever. But that's a really good reminder as well, is like, at least for me, when I'm composing or writing, it's primarily for myself, which Diamonds and Demons was. It was really that relationship with myself and kind of dancing with darkness, how to navigate those polarities of the light and the dark. And so when he talks about that, I'm always like, yes. And it's really freeing as well. Yeah, we don't need to write for anybody, and it doesn't need to be anything big, and it doesn't need to be a hit. It's just, you just write from your heart, and like everything else is up to the universe and up to existence. It's out of your hands. You don't have control over something that is, if people will like it or not. You have to like it. You have to love it. And so for me, that's really an important reminder. And sometimes I can be a bit too much of a harsh critic of myself, and that can get in the way, or being a bit of a perfectionist, and that can also be a block, and not allowing the messiness, or there's this kind of tendency for instant gratification that the moment you pick up a guitar, you've got to write a song, and forgetting the process of what it takes to write a song. And some people can write songs like that. I've never been one like that. It takes me time. Like, Long Way Home, for example, I think it took me about a year to complete. So I started with the intro, and I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. I love that. I love that. But I didn't know how to take it from there. And I put it down, and I didn't touch it for a few months. And then I did I went out with some friends somewhere, and it kind of ignited this relationship with the song again. And it brought in another chapter of the song. And I think that's also why there's this tendency in my songs, at least from that album. I don't know how it will be in the future, but some of the songs feel like there's 2 or 3 parts. It starts a certain way, and then it goes into another kind of chapter of the song, and then it has this finale, which is also very different to the beginning and the middle. And I wonder if that's maybe because I write them at different times of the year, or it's not. I never sit down in a couple of days and bang out a song.
Right.
I wish I could. Although these walls, I wrote really quickly. I wrote that in a couple of days.
What do you think gave that impetus to write it in a couple of days?
I don't know. It was a time in my life I had left Costa Rica, and we were back in Guernsey, which is where I currently live and was born and raised. And we were in this we were like in the beginning of this whole new chapter, and I was in the process of starting to record the album, and it felt so overwhelming for me and so big and scary. And I felt really, I don't know, I just remember really grappling with these really insecure thoughts. And it was a very I can be really hard on myself. And it was a very painful period of time, because I was stepping into this new chapter of writing an album and recording an album, and it felt really scary. And I just remember being in a dark place with it. And so I guess when I'm in those motions, and when I'm really in it, not that I'm not in it with the other songs, but it was just easy to express it. It just came out. Like These Walls was it's such a song of the inner labyrinth within our minds, the voices that tell us that we're not good enough and we're not worthy, and who are we? Who do we think we are? So it felt I was so in it that it was easy to kind of, I didn't have to imagine a time when I felt in that place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you were there, like it was happening.
It was happening, and it was alive, and it was just like visceral, and it was overtaking me, and it paralyzed me, and it was just remember it kind of, I had this, I remember I was meant to be recording with a really big producer back in London, and it was just like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this. I feel like such a fraud, and there was so much pressure. I felt so much pressure, and it kind of was from that kind of combination of working with a really big producer that had worked with really big names. And I felt, it was too much for me at that time, I think. I don't know, but then I wrote this song. And
so in writing that song, I'm curious, because you did something there that you had two choices. One is you could have just stayed in the fear, or maybe you did even after, but I'm curious, did writing that song help you to process that intensity that you were going through?
A little bit. Okay. I don't think it fully got rid of it, but maybe it brought a bit of comfort. I think what elevated the fear, or kind of made it less intense, was just going through the journey of making the album. It doesn't sound like a big thing, like everyone makes albums, but I think for me it was a really big step. And I was raising money at the time as well for funding the album through an Indiegogo campaign. So I felt really exposed. It wasn't just some little,
very vulnerable.
Oh, I'm going to just do something in my free time. It was like putting myself out there into the world, and it felt really vulnerable and scary, and working with these big producers, and it was just like, what am I doing? I am such a fucking fraud, But it gave me that whole journey of recording the album and writing the songs, and sometimes writing songs under pressure. And I think it gave me a lot of tools how to navigate that now. Like whenever I get those kind of doubtful thoughts, I'm like, oh, I recognize you. I know who you are. So I know how to somehow, it's not that those voices disappear. It's just the volume of those voices can come down a little bit more, because you're like, oh, I've been there. And I know this tendency to self-sabotage, or to put myself down, or to be hard on myself when I'm stepping into something new. And it happens with every new project. Anything new that I'm stepping into, those voices come, and they all have the same kind of feeling about them. So it's easier for me I kind of identify them and be like, okay, this isn't a sign that I shouldn't do what I'm doing. This is just part of the process, for me at least, and everyone's different. I think in general, I've always struggled with confidence. Performing, not necessarily. Like when I'm sharing my music in front of an audience, I'm so in it. Most of the time, of course, there are times when I'm not in it, and that can be really painful. But when I'm in it, it's like I had a concert back home last week, and it was a really beautiful one. And I remember just feeling this really beautiful energy coming through me, and that enabled me just to kind of get lost. And because sometimes what I feel as a musician in that way is, there's Nessie Gomes, like me now, and then there's Nessie Gomes on sharing in front of an audience music. And it's like it's like I'm calling in this kind of alter ego, this very kind of like witchy, powerful woman energy, and she feels very old as well. Like she feels, and sometimes I've experienced her in ceremony, and that's been really like, ooh, like that's been a really beautiful meeting. Of course, it is me, but there's something that I'm able to access through music. And it feels like a very different version of who I am, because in day-to-day life, I'm a bit neurotic. I feel quite insecure or not so confident. And sometimes I do. I can be, I don't know, I have my challenges as a human being. And then when I'm on stage and I'm really in that connection with music and singing, and it always comes through the voice. It's like the moment I feel that connection, it's like something else is coming through and she takes over. And it's a very powerful, it feels like a very powerful energy, spirit, elder woman. Like I feel this real connection to someone very old singing through me. And then I'm gone. And then I come off and I'm like, wow, that was so beautiful. And when that happens, it's really magic. And sometimes there's a tendency to kind of relive that and hold on to it and call it in, and it doesn't. And you feel like you're still in this physical body on earth and you haven't quite called the spirit in. And so you have to be very patient, and it requires also just to be relaxed. And sometimes I'm not relaxed when I'm standing in front of people. I'm just like, But when I am, and I'm really in that, it's a beautiful moment, and I really cherish it when it comes.
It's so interesting to hear you speak, because it brings such a humanness to creativity. And I think that for many people listening to this could be one of the gifts of this conversation, because listening to your music is, and I say this as a musician, like the production level, the quality of the lyrics, the melodics, the quality of your voice, like on every level, to me, it's exceptional. And so to hear the humanness and meet the humanness as well of like, you know, like I wrote this song because I was just like, I'm such a fake, I shouldn't be here while I record it. That's amazing. And I think it's helpful because those voices are, for so many of us, are the reason we don't show up in the world. Those fucking voices. So yeah, it's helpful.
I remember, it's not related to music, but you know, from a young age, like my father, I love him, but he's a very fearful person. He's very driven by fear. He won't do things in life by fear. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to live my life in fear and kind of miss out on opportunities because of fear. And from a very young age, I was always challenging that in myself. And coming from such a small island like Guernsey, which is like 12 kilometers long and 9 kilometers wide, you know, it's a real bubble here. It's very safe, and you don't need to challenge yourself too much because everything is very accessible and comfortable. And I wanted to feel challenged in life. And I remember going to the UK for the first time on my own. I think I was, 19. And I just remember feeling so overwhelmed by the whole train situation. Like getting on a train, I was like, how do you know that you get to the right place? It just seemed so big and so vast for me. And I don't know, I think for me, I think that was the biggest gift I received from making my album, was that because it feels like a death, right? It feels like you're dying, which to some extent it is, because it's like your ego, right? Your ego wants everything in place and everything to be like as it is, and it's doing what it wants to do to protect you. But sometimes it's those voices or those fears, they just hold us back. And I think for me, making the album and putting myself out there was really scary. Not just musically, but when I had to think about visuals and photos, and I was like, oh my God. And I felt like past my sell-by date, because the whole music industry is so focused on young, looking a certain way. And I didn't necessarily fall into that kind of stereotypical category. I think things have changed, maybe not. It's still very, but also I don't really consider myself to be part of the music industry, because I did my own thing. I wasn't signed to a label. Everything that I did organically and independently with my husband. But all those voices came up, especially being a woman and kind of being heavily critical on the way I looked and feeling like not beautiful enough, or which I know it's just that's what I passed through, at least, and it was just all these hurdles that I had to get over. And I feel really lucky and blessed to have such a supportive network of friends and family around me, especially my husband, who really supported me through that journey and believed in me massively. He believed in me way more than I believed in myself. And sometimes that brought a lot of tension because he could see the potential and I didn't. And I would, in those early years or early stages, I was just shutting everything down, saying no, out of fear. And then I guess the turning point for me was when we did release the crowdfunding campaign, and we raised $50,000 for the album. And that's when I got my first confirmation from the one I remember being, okay, maybe I'm not such a fraud. Like maybe there is something in this that people really believe in and they want to support, because that's a huge amount of money to raise. And nobody really knew me. Maybe people knew me from the medicine circles, because at that time I was singing a lot in ceremony, and ceremony was a very big part of my life during that time. It still is, but it's changed somewhat since I've had a child. But yeah, I think, going back to your point, I really feel for those that really fall into those traps of believing the voices inside themselves that tell them that they're not good enough, or they're not worthy, or they're a fraud, because we all have them. All of us have them. And I guess it's just finding tools that help us get through it. And I think it also it helps when you have a support of people around you that love you and encourage you, and not to be afraid to fall on your face. And when I released the album, my husband at the time, he was running all around London, meeting up with labels, like literally just traveling all the time, just meeting labels and presenting them with the album. And I was just like, oh, that's so intense. And I felt this intensity around it, like as if they say no, then I am not worthy of what I'm doing. And I was like, no, fuck that. Like, I don't know where I got this kind of information, but I just remember like feeling like there is not one formula. There's not this one formula that you need to follow, that if you get it, then you are success. Then you've made it. I just remember feeling like I made an album and that was fucking hard. And that for me is success. Whether or not the world around me receives it it's out of my hands. I don't have control over that. But for me, I have made this body of work. I poured my heart, my blood, my sweat, my tears into it. And I'm alive at the end of it. For me, that's success. And then I think all the labels were like, nah, they're nice songs, but there's no hits. And I was just like, oh, I really don't care about that. I did not write this album to make hits. And at one point, my husband relaxed about it. He's like, you know what? Whoever will want to receive this album, they will receive it. And then he came to kind of the same conclusion as me, in the sense that it's out of our hands, and the people that will listen to it and love it, they'll find their way to it. We don't need a record label. We don't need to be signed. And I'm so happy not to be signed to a label. I'm sure there's some wonderful ones out there, but I've known friends being signed to a label and they've just felt a prisoner in it, and they haven't necessarily, it's not necessarily elevated their career, it's just trapped them, and they're just finding ways to get out of it because they're tied into such a strict contract that they can't even perform, and it's, God, I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have sadly too many friends who have had that exact experience where, and that's the story we're sold. And actually, I think a lot of the time the modern society does that to us. It says, if you can't take care of yourself, you need someone who's going to take care of you, be that a record label or a teacher or a government or whatever, some big brother, daddy out there who's going to take care of it. But all you have to do is give up all your rights and then you'll be fine. And so there's a beauty in what you're saying. There's a deep resonance of that. that the people who need what we share are just waiting for it. Like they need it. And come on, let's get it out there.
Yeah. That I put it out there. I was touring in 2015. We did our first little tour, and it was really like super humble tour. It wasn't anything that it is now, or it was just like, I remember being on my Facebook and saying, "Hey guys, I'm planning to come to Europe. Let me know if you want me to come and play in your town or your house." So I did loads of gigs in people's homes, and we got a hire car, and part of the campaign and the money that we raised from the campaign was also supporting the tour that we did. It was very grassroots. It was very organic. Like it was fun because I was like, cool, I'm just going to rock up and play a gig to 20 people. And then I was playing in yoga centers because at that time there was no booking agent, or there wasn't also I didn't feel like my music fitted into anything at that point. And yeah, it was all very kind of organic and grassroots, and people hearing my demos on SoundCloud, which was also the entry. Like I just put stuff on SoundCloud and people were like, wow, really like this. And then people would invite me to their homes, or yeah, it was like that.
It's beautiful. And there's a few parts that you've mentioned that I want to see if we can kind of get to them all because they're very interesting. But the one is around support. So you've mentioned a few times the importance of the good support, and you've also specifically mentioned your husband. And yeah, I guess I'm curious about what was it about his support? He said he believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. So what did that look like practically? And I'm just just to explore a bit more about what that kind of support can look like.
Well, I guess, with my husband, he's one of these guys, he's definitely a manifester. If something comes to his mind, he can make things happen. And he's very committed and total. He poured every inch, every cell of his heart and being into kind of help lift this project, because there's so many details in terms of, I guess, especially when you're starting out, like the campaign, the negotiations, the talking to people. Like I don't take care of any of the kind of nitty gritty, boring stuff. And my husband does. He's very involved in the kind of logistics of my career. And he was right from the beginning. So he took all of that off my shoulders, where I imagine there's so many gifted musicians out there that don't have that, and they have to kind of juggle all these different hats. Maybe for some artists they love it, but for me, I would just not be able to do anything if it was just solo. And look, we did a lot on our own anyway. It was just me and Lino, and we didn't have a management, we didn't have a booking agent, we didn't have a label. We did everything on our own. So we were kind of navigating that between us. He would take the heavy load of emails and writing to people and reaching people. Now we don't need to do that so much. People, if a festival wants to book me, for example, they write to us. Whereas in the past, we would just shoot at 100 different directions going, hey, we'd like to play at your festival, or that kind of thing. But he was, I feel, I want to kind of honor him because, like when we did the tour last year, for example, I would say 80% of that is just the preparation, and then 20% is showing up, doing the gig. It's like the talent and the offering, I would say it's a way smaller piece than all the logistics and emails and meetings and negotiations, all that stuff. It takes so much time and energy. And I feel like it's always been like that. And so to have him right from the beginning on that level, and on the creative level as well, because when we made the album, he was involved in the creation of it as well. So he was also in a way part of the production team and would help sometimes with writing lyrics. If I was kind of struggling to finish something, he would input his work, and sometimes it brought a lot of tension as well, like being in a partnership with your husband how to navigate your personal relationship and your business relationship. In the beginning, that was really challenging. And we had a few times people say it's going to destroy your marriage and you should never do it. Like, we advise you not to go down there. But it was all we knew. Like, Lino was so good at what he was doing. And yes, there were moments where it brought tension, but I don't know, like, it also brought this magic. And it was like, I don't know who else can replace him if we do that. And I don't have any regrets, even if there has been moments in our relationship where it has been kind of strained or challenged because you're maybe way too much in the business relationship and not enough in the personal relationship. So you're constantly learning how to dance in that field together. And of course we have a child, and there's that element as well. And we were touring together all last year, and the whole family came on the road, and we had a nanny. And so I don't know. I think every couple is different. I don't think there's one formula for one thing. It's like you find what works for you individually and as a family, and you're constantly adjusting yourself accordingly to make it work for everybody. So I don't feel that there's just one way to do things. The same with the music. There's not just one way to release music. I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to have a career with music, with what I'm doing, unless I was signed to a label. And I'm not. I don't have any of those things in place. And I have a very sweet, humble life, and I do all right.
It's awesome. And also, like we were saying, the opposite can sometimes be true. Sometimes people who do sign to labels, that's actually the end of their career. And I know more than one friend that's been true for, because obviously, anyway, signing away their rights to their own creations, which is, anyway, that's a very sad thing. But there's another piece you mentioned. It's a bit of a jump in terms of the topic, but it's something I'm just curious about because it seems like such a big part of your journey, and that is working with plant medicines. And I believe specifically with ayahuasca, based on what you've been saying, I'm not sure, but I'm curious if you feel open to sharing that, because there's something very powerful there. Like, what has that brought you? What have you brought to it? How has that relationship been a part of your journey as a person and as a musician?
Well, I mean, the first time I was in ceremony, and it was my medicine, I guess, is ayahuasca, and it's the Brazilian kind of Santa Daime type, because there's different types, there's different lineages. And the first ceremony I did was a Brazilian kind of lineage, and which was very comforting for me because, of course, of my Portuguese roots, and sitting there with the book, singing all the songs in Portuguese was very healing for me, because when I grew up in Guernsey, I had a lot of shame around my Portuguese heritage. And so it felt like there felt something really powerful and beautiful to sit there and sing these Portuguese songs and be with the medicine in that way. But so pre-medicine or pre-ceremony, I'd been writing for many years. And like I said, my musical journey started when I was about 14, 15. I was in many bands. But I would say a lot of my songs were around heartbreak and boys and love songs, basically. We all love a good love song.
Love a good love song.
Yeah. But what happened was, and it was literally overnight, I had this very intense ceremony, and it was beautiful and it was intense and it was everything. I just remember many moments of it being like, what have I done? Why am I here? And just fighting with myself and mentally, but in a good way, not in a really out of control way. And I remember I just felt so open and so something in my heart, and I just felt so tender after the ceremony. And so I went back to my casita and I picked up my guitar and I wrote my first song from that experience, which is on the album, and it's called You Guided Me. And that was my first song that wasn't about boys. It was the relationship with myself and my journey, and it came from a very different place. And so I would say content wise, or it kind of brought a different perspective. It helped me write from a different perspective rather than just from a place of relationships with guys. Yeah. And then secondly, it kind of, it's really hard to put it into words. And I always feel like I'm making it sound really weak, the experience, when I do that. But when I kind of started to work a bit more with in ceremony and was invited to share songs during ceremony, and I would have this incredible meeting with my voice on the tea, and it was really quite a phenomenal experience where I really felt like the medicine singing through me, and like I could hear, I don't know, I was like, I became way more sensitive to different sounds and textures, and I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just, that's the only way I can describe it. It literally felt like the spirit of the medicine was using me as a channel and singing through me. So it also shaped a lot of how I was using my voice. And I feel, even though I'm not doing ceremonies as much in the last couple of years, it's made an imprint, and it's taught me how to be aware of energy in the space and how to use the energy in the space to bring a certain feeling or emotion, to really listen deeply. Because when you come into the circle and you're there with your guitar, and the stillness in the room and the silence, and you can literally, it's like your antennae, you have all these antennae and you can feel everything. And it's like that first note and that comes out your mouth, and the first note that you play on the guitar, and it has this sensitivity. Everything is so alive and sensitive, and you can feel it. It's like you can almost hold it and cut it with a knife. It's so present. It's not just a sound. It's like a whole body experience. And so for me, I would say the medicine, it shaped the way I was writing, and it also massively, if not more, it shaped the way I was using my voice, and gave me a lot of inspiration as well for how I cultivate that energy when I'm not in ceremony, how to bring that into my offerings that aren't ceremonial. You know what I mean? If it's a gig or something, or a performance, how to call that energy, how to remember. It's like I feel like I have the DNA of the medicine in my body. Like the reason I'm not drinking so much is because I feel also at one point that was a clear message. It's like, you've done enough. Like, now do the work. You don't need to have any more ceremonies in your life. You've drunk enough. At least that's, maybe I'm making that up, but that was kind of what I understood. But yeah, I feel plant medicine is mostly ayahuasca, because I have experimented and been in other types of ceremonies, but this particular medicine it was very opening for me, and it always took me into these different realms, and that I could access my voice in different ways. Yeah.
Wow, you definitely gave me full body goosebumps there while you were talking. Just that feeling of where it's not just a sound, but it's the universe has come together to create this moment. And there's something very visceral about that. I don't know if you've heard the quote. I just heard it recently and it was so impactful for me, but I think it said something like, art is how we decorate space and music is how we decorate time. And I just, because it's so ephemeral, it's only existing while it's happening. And so it's the way that we add something to time. And anyway, what you were saying reminded me of that. And I know that you help other people as well to find their own voices. So I'd love to hear a little bit of just what that looks like, and also anything else you want to share about what projects you kind of got going on at the moment, or you want people to know about.
So another part of my work that I'm very passionate about is my retreats and workshops, which is called Vocal Odyssey. They were born and birthed in 2014. And along my journey in the last 20 years, I studied holistic voice therapy. I trained with the British Academy of Sound Therapy in 2014 and 18. And I studied the healing arts, a degree in healing arts for 3 years. So music therapy, but it was more, it wasn't like music therapy as a master's, but like kind of the entry into that field. Because when I got into music, like I said, primarily it was from a healing perspective. I was a pretty troubled kid, and music was my way to support me. And so when I first heard about music being like approached as in a healing modality, I was like, wow, that fully resonates with me, because that was my story. I don't see it just as entertainment. I don't see music as just a form of entertaining an audience. There's real healing that happens there, because I experienced it firsthand. So that got me really excited and led me to study in Derby University for 3 years. And then some years later, I was like, my story is the voice. Like this is what I'm really passionate about. Because I was debating whether to continue into a master's with music therapy, but I'm not really a musician, in terms of playing piano or anything like that. The story was the voice. And at that time, I couldn't really find anything specifically around voice work. And then when I left Pachamama in 2013, I reached out to a friend who was doing some sound healing studies, and her school also offered voice therapy, holistic voice therapy course to be certified. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this. This is really something I'm passionate about and I want to learn more about. And so 2014, Vocal Odyssey was birthed. And because I had people come and approach me and be like, I'd love you to teach me how to sing. And I was never really interested in technical stuff. Even myself, I know very little technical things. Maybe I know more than I'm aware of, but I never really studied aspects of singing. It was all very intuitive. But what got me thinking from that question and that invitation was like, well, I'm very interested in the relationship to our voice, and not just around singing, but the full spectrum of expression, whether it's speaking. And so it planted a seed. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working with many people around their voice and kind of creating these containers where we can meet our voice in a safe way and express them in ways that we're not necessarily, maybe we gave ourselves permission to, or maybe we grew up in environments where we were very oppressed, or we were ridiculed from the way we sounded, or we were told to be quiet, or there's many different layers of how someone can shut down their voice. And I grew up in an environment where I very early on realized that being a girl, you have different rules to being a man or a boy. And even the way I was listened to, or because I was a girl, or maybe my point of view wasn't taken as seriously as if it was if I was a guy, and that's one aspect of it. And so I'm very passionate about creating these places for people to really dive deep into this beautiful medicine. And we all have access to it. It's just so many of us have maybe had early traumas around it. And then we kind of label ourselves as non-creative, or not, that we can't sing. And it's like, when I started my journey with singing, I couldn't really sing the way I do now. That's been over 20 years of devotion and cultivation and really getting to know my voice. And I know through singing, in a way, people come to the work thinking, oh, I wonder how I can improve it. And maybe what they quickly find out, or by the end of our journey together, is actually, I didn't come here learning how to sing. I came here singing to learn about myself. It goes beyond the song. It's not about the song. It's not about singing beautiful. It's about the relationship you have to yourself and to the world around you. And people do that in different ways. People do that through yoga. People do that maybe from being in nature. But my altar is the voice, and how to make that your ally and how to kind of bring it more into our life. And I know in certain cultures, in Western culture, depends, like different traditions, like I guess say the Irish, music is really embedded into their culture, singing together is really embedded into their culture. But in other places it's not like that. It's like music is considered to be a hobby, or it's not treated as something as valuable as, I don't know, studying the academics. And I was never good at academics, I always struggled. But when it came to creativity, this is where I found my aliveness, and this is where I was able to kind of transform from a very troubled kid into a very confident woman who, of course, has her insecurities, but feels closer to herself. I know how to relate to myself. I know, how to listen to myself. And I believe these skills are things that I've picked up from singing. Using the voice as a holistic tool. It's probably one of the most holistic tools that we have, because it engages your breath, it connects you to your heart, it connects you to your body, it connects you to spirit, it softens the ego state. So it's really all encompassing. And it's right there, right in front of us. And so for me to create these journeys for people, I'm also learning as well. It's not that I come with all the answers, because I feel like we are these vessels that contain so much information and wisdom, and sometimes through singing that puts us into this very deep state, and it helps us to access other layers of understanding. So the learning and the wisdom is coming from that person. I just create a container and give invitations to try different things, rituals or something a bit more practical. But I like to make it very ritualistic so that we go very deep into the space. And sometimes the simple act of just humming, can just help to relax the nervous system and bring us back into our body, help us get out of our head. So yeah, this is something that's my other baby that I'm very passionate about. And it's always an honor to work with people and to challenge in a respectful way. Like, nothing is forced, because obviously it can be really traumatizing and humiliating for people to feel like they need to do something that they don't want to. So it really has to be centered around their needs and what's right for them. But it's a beautiful moment when you see somebody coming into the space, and maybe what they wanted to share or needed to share is like this guttural scream that they've been keeping in for years. Sometimes it's not, like I said, it's not necessarily about the song or singing in tune, or it's giving space to the parts of ourselves that we have silenced, whether it's from ourselves or from society. So it's a real work of reclamation and healing and expression and joy as well. It's really fun. It's beautiful. Well,
I love that. You got me keen. I would love to do one of your processes. That sounds really amazing. I feel, it's inspiring to think of opening the voice up in these different ways. We're coming towards the end here, and I wanted to ask you the question I ask every guest, which is, when you hear the words "we are already free," what comes up for you?
Oh, that's a big one. I think it's a bit like the end of my song, "All There Is Love." No, it doesn't say that. Is it? What's the end of "Long Way Home"? I'm not very good at saying the words. Love is all there is.
Love is all there is.
Yeah. So what I feel about that is, yes, on those kind of fundamental parts, like the foundation, like love is all there is and we are already free. Is that the right way of saying it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think yes. And I think, but there's all these layers that we have kind of get in the way, our ideas of who we think we are and who we should be, so that can get in the way of that kind of, that truth, that universal truth. That's my feeling. It's there. We got to do the work sometimes to remember that. And I feel like when I think about when I do the work with singing, it really takes me to that place. It really helps me to feel the freedom, the aliveness, that it's just these kind of constructs that we have created from ourselves or from the world around us that have told us or put messages on us to say that we're not free. So it's there, but it can get easily forgotten.
Yeah. Beautiful. Nessie, again, I just deeply honoring your work. And in fact, today's conversation has, for me personally, been an important reflection because I am being called ever more forward and into expansion, and have been really wrestling those old voices and stories that are like very loud right now. And it's the only one who's saying it is me. The whole universe is, all the people I'm hanging out with, the guests I have on my podcast, like every person in my world, in my life is, Nathan, please keep going. Please keep sharing what you're doing. But those voices have been very loud. I'm actually sitting with the medicine in a few weeks' time for the first time in a few years, and I feel like she's really going to help me to find some of the root of what this story of not enoughness is for me. Because it's
I'm there with you. I'm there with you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nessie. And it feels like a lovely reminder of just the humanness of us all, that we really are on this path together. As Ramdas says, we're all just walking each other home. And I feel that. So thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure also.
Thank you for joining us today, dear listener. I hope you found Nessie's insights as enlightening and inspiring as I did. It's not every day that we get to explore such deep connections between our inner voices and the powerful transformation that comes from truly listening to and expressing ourselves. Today we traveled with Nessie from the island of Guernsey to the spiritual landscapes of the Amazon, uncovering how the power of singing can be a profound tool for healing and personal growth. We discovered how embracing our authentic voices can lead to a richer, more fulfilling life. Remember, every challenge we face is also an opportunity for growth, and every voice, including yours, carries a story worth sharing. So share. As we wrap up today's journey with Nessie Gomes, let's reflect about how we start our mornings. If Nessie's story inspired you to embrace your voice and gifts, my 5-day morning practice challenge is the perfect next step. It's designed to transform your mornings from meh to woohoo, setting a tone of positivity and intention for your day. Imagine starting each day feeling grounded and centered, feeling empowered to speak your truth with an open heart and a clear mind. That's what Adrian found through the challenge, moving from frustration to a place of self-acceptance and peace, appreciating the simplicity and support that the challenge provides each step of the way. Emma, another participant, rediscovered her motivation and focus, calling the easygoing, value-packed lessons a game changer for her daily routine. Are you ready to begin your journey to more mindful mornings? Join us by signing up for the free challenge at the link in the show notes. Start your day empowered and aligned. Carry that energy through everything you do and allow the gift of your story to be heard by us all. Until next time, I'm Nathan Maingard, and it's been an honor to be with you here today, remembering together that we are already free.